I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. I'm going to continue in the Gospels. Now Christ went back down to Jerusalem again for a second feast, which I believe to be the Feast of Tabernacles, although possibly it was the next Passover. But the Jews again conspire to kill him because he is healing on the Sabbath and he has declared himself Lord of the Sabbath, and so the Jewish leaders want to get rid of him. So he goes back up to Galilee. And while there, he has ordained the 12 apostles, so he is now actually organizing a church. Before he was just preaching, collecting followers, now he is organizing a church. And immediately after ordaining the 12, he comes down, and the multitudes have gathered from all regions round about, and he sits down to teach them. He preaches the Sermon on the Mount. We read this sermon once in Luke, although there are some who think that the sermon recounted in Luke is a separate sermon, sometimes called the Sermon in the Plain, but it teaches the same principles, and so we're reading it together. The Sermon on the Mount in Matthew begins in chapter 5, and so that's where we're going to turn to now. Now, this is somewhat of a long chapter, so we're going to divide it into 3 portions. Now, this is just so that we can digest everything in this sermon. And we will actually read the Joseph Smith translation as separate videos. So we're going to be doing a lot of videos here. We're going to do first verses 1 through 16. Then in the next video, we will do the Joseph Smith translation. Then we will do the next 16 verses. Then we'll do the Joseph Smith translation. Then we'll do the last 16 verses. Then we'll do the Joseph Smith translation. So it's going to get 6 videos to get through chapter 5 here, but there's a lot of good stuff. So let us read these first 16 verses. And seeing the multitude, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they which do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. In Luke, we didn't have quite as many blessings here, but we still had that statement, rejoice when you're persecuted, because the prophets have been persecuted as well. You are in good company. But let us look at these statements. Now, first of all, this is called the Beatitudes. Now, when I was young, I just thought that meant the attitudes that you're supposed to be. These are the attitudes of life. These are the attitudes that if we espouse these attitudes and exemplify them in our lives, we will be blessed for it. That's what I thought the term meant. I have since learned that that is not what it means, although I think it is a happy coincidence that it is Beatitudes in English. Where this term comes from is Latin. In the Latin Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Bible, the term blessed is rendered as the Latin word beati. That means blessed. Now Cicero, he coined the term beatitudo, which is a noun meaning state of blessedness. And he coined the term to describe this passage in Matthew, the Beatitudes, the state of blessedness. So if we are to be fully blessed by God, we will adopt the states, or these, as I say, attitudes of being. And if we can acquire this state of being, we are in a state of blessedness. Therefore, they are the Beatitudes. Also note that they are somewhat of a progression. They don't just stand individually, but it's first, blessed are the poor in spirit. Then, if you are poor in spirit, then you mourn. Those that mourn are comforted. Then, the meek. Then those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. Then you have the merciful. Then you get the pure in heart. Then you have the peacemakers. And it's this progression. And it's very similar to what we will eventually read in the book of Peter. I think it's the second epistle of Peter where he says, add to your faith, obedience, and it's Peter chapter 1. Add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge temperance, to temperance patience, and to patience godliness. And it's the same kind of thing that we're getting here in Matthew. Have this progression. The poor in spirit, those who mourn. And when it says mourn, it's not necessarily talking about just those who are sad or suffering, but those who mourn over the sins of the world. Those who look out upon the world and see the corruption and sorrow over it. But it is a progression. The poor in spirit, that's one thing, but to be merciful, that's a little higher. To mourn for the wickedness of the world is a little bit more than being poor in spirit. To be meek is a little bit more. And as we go, we progress until we get to a perfect state of blessedness. So now let us read the rest of this. Verse 13. Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost his savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on an hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works, and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Now this portion is Christ telling us, telling all the saints, to be the example to the world. Let your light so shine. Also, we are the salt of the world. Now, how does salt lose its savor? The only way for salt to actually lose its savor is if it is corrupted, if it is mixed with other things. Salt does not naturally spoil. Salt is a mineral. It's like, getting a chunk of gold. It just stays gold. It's that. It is a mineral. It does not lose anything if it just sits there. But if you mix it with something, you put water in it, especially if you put other chemicals in it, you can dilute the salt, and then it loses its savor. And recall that in the book of Numbers, under the law of Moses, part of a number of the sacrifices, a number of the rituals, included salt as a symbol of purity. So now we leave this here, and we will turn to the Joseph Smith translation next. So I will see you there.